The house was never supposed to feel like this. It was a Thursday morning in mid-July when Margaret Carson stepped off her return flight from San Diego. Her son Daniel had just dropped her off at the airport hours earlier after hosting her for a 5-day visit filled with home-cooked dinners, movie nights, and time with the grandkids. Margaret hadn't been away from her house in Elkridge, Colorado for more than a few days in years, but this time, something felt different. As her cab pulled into the driveway, the first thing she noticed was that the front garden, normally trimmed, watered, and pristine, looked dry. A few dead leaves were scattered across the porch, and one of her prized potted ferns had turned brown. She narrowed her eyes but said nothing to the driver. Maybe Lucas forgot to water them. Margaret unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air was stale, heavy. There was no fresh breeze, no soft scent of linen or lemon that she normally kept in the house. The temperature was higher than usual, and the blinds were still drawn, making the living room feel dim and strangely claustrophobic. Then the silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that makes you pause instinctively, the kind that tells you something's wrong. She took a few slow steps into the house and scanned the space. Shoes left out by the door. A pile of takeout containers on the kitchen counter. One of the chairs from the dining room was oddly tipped back, resting awkwardly against the wall. She walked farther in, her pulse quickening. The hallway light was off. The air smelled faintly of something metallic. She wasn't sure if it was blood, mold, or just her imagination. Then she saw it. The door to her bedroom. It was locked. Not just shut, locked from the outside. A padlock. And not one she'd ever seen before. Her mouth went dry. Margaret stood there for a long moment, staring at that silver lock gleaming in the faint light. Then she did what any mother would do. She called her son. Lucas didn't answer. She tried again. On the third ring, he picked up. "Mom? Hey." "Lucas," she said sharply, "why is my door locked? What happened to the house? Why is everything a mess?" There was a pause. I was just helping you pack," he said, voice a little too casual. "Didn't know you were coming back today. I told you the date 3 times. He sighed. "I'll be home soon. I was at the movies." The call ended without any real resolution. Margaret didn't like that. She'd been through too much in life to ignore red flags. So she waited. Half an hour later, Lucas returned. He came through the door with that familiar uneven gait, his crutch tapping against the wood floor. Ever since the accident, his motorcycle crash in Hawaii 2 years earlier, he'd lost his left leg below the knee. Margaret had taken care of him during his recovery. Nursed him. Fed him. Bathed him. Now here he was, standing in the living room with a paper soda cup and an expression she couldn't quite read. "What is going on here, Lucas?" she asked quietly. He shrugged. "Just got messy, that's all. Thought you were going to stay longer with Daniel. I was trying to organize stuff, help you prep for the move." "What move?" "You said you might come live with Daniel in San Diego." "I never said that," she snapped. "I said I might visit longer next time. That's it." Lucas didn't respond. That night, the tension in the house thickened like storm clouds that refused to burst. Margaret barely slept. She left the bedroom door unlocked, but only after she cut the padlock off with bolt cutters she retrieved from the garage herself. The next morning, she tried calling Daniel. No answer. She left a voicemail, telling him she was back and that something felt off. That Lucas was acting strange. Daniel never got that message. Because by 8 p.m. that same day, Margaret Carson was gone. Vanished. Lucas said she left. Packed a few things. Told him not to tell anyone. Headed back to San Diego. But her suitcase was still in the corner. Her makeup bag, untouched. Her car? Missing. 3 days passed before Daniel realized something was wrong. When Margaret hadn't called to say she got home, hadn't texted to confirm anything, hadn't answered a single message, he started to panic. He called Lucas. Lucas didn't answer. When he finally did, around midnight, his tone was off. Distant. He said Margaret had left. That she was fine. "She probably just needs space," Lucas said. Daniel didn't believe him. Neither did their Uncle Thomas, who showed up at the house unannounced the next morning. Lucas opened the door shirtless, irritated. He let Thomas in reluctantly. The house looked even worse now. The curtains still drawn. The floor sticky in spots. Thomas asked where Margaret was. Lucas repeated his story. She left. Took off. Said she needed air. But nothing in that house looked like someone had packed and left. Margaret's phone charger was still plugged in beside the bed. Her reading glasses were on the kitchen counter. And in the garage, beneath a faint trail of what looked like rust, was a thin line of something darker. Something dry, but sticky at the edges. Thomas didn't say anything. He just stared. And then he called Daniel. And Daniel called the police. The official missing persons report was filed on July 27th, 2 days after Margaret had supposedly left. By then, her car had been found near Elkridge Elementary School, abandoned in the back lot. The keys were in the ignition. Her purse still inside. No signs of struggle. No fingerprints that didn't belong. The trunk was empty. The driver's seat was adjusted far too close to the steering wheel, unusual for a tall woman like Margaret. A witness later said they saw the car that morning, with a blonde woman driving. Said she looked young. Nervous. There might have been someone else in the back seat. That was when detectives stopped treating it like a disappearance. And started treating it like a crime. Her life had been built from silence, sacrifice, and second chances. Before Margaret Carson vanished from her quiet house in Elkridge, before the blinds stayed drawn and the lock appeared on her bedroom door, before her son gave the police a version of events no one believed, there was another version of Margaret. Not the missing woman. Not the victim. But the woman who survived more than once. Margaret had been a widow for nearly 25 years. Her husband, Benjamin Carson, a truck driver with a roving eye and restless nature, had left one morning for a haul through Utah and never came back. No crash. No call. No note. Just gone. At first, people assumed the worst. Then they learned the truth. Benjamin had moved to Arizona, started a new life, and had 2 more children with another woman, without ever finalizing his marriage to Margaret or telling their sons he was alive. It was the kind of betrayal that could hollow out a person. But Margaret didn't cave in. Not publicly. Not even when Lucas asked why his dad never called on his birthday anymore. Not even when Daniel stopped asking altogether. Instead, she showed up to work every morning at the county records office, processed tax returns, came home to make dinner, and helped with homework. She poured everything she had into her boys. No matter how tired, no matter how hurt. By the time Daniel left for college, Margaret was nearly 50. Her job was stable. Her house was paid off. Her savings modest but steady. Yet something about the silence that settled over the house unsettled her. For the first time in decades, she wasn't needed. So, she made a decision that surprised everyone. She enrolled in community college. Margaret had dropped out years earlier when she got pregnant with Daniel. Now, she picked up where she left off. Business administration. Project management. Even real estate law. Within 2 years, she had her real estate license in hand. It wasn't a career move. It was a personal one. A way to reclaim something that had been lost. She wasn't just someone's mother, someone's ex-wife, someone's dependable colleague. She was herself again. By 62, Margaret had fully retired from county work and shifted into part-time real estate, helping families in Elkridge buy their first homes. She was efficient, honest, and kind. Never pushy. Never flashy. She didn't need to make a fortune. She just liked helping people feel settled. Her house reflected the life she had built. Neat, lived in, warm. The lawn was cut twice a week, not because she wanted to impress the neighbors, but because she liked the rhythm of it. The garden bed out front was filled with petunias and lavender, all carefully labeled with handwritten markers. Inside, the scent of citrus and chamomile lingered in the air. She read mystery novels. She listened to AM radio. She drank tea with honey every night before bed. She was alone. But never lonely. Then Lucas came back. At first, it was supposed to be temporary. A short visit after his motorcycle accident in Hawaii. A place to recover while figuring out his next steps. Margaret had hesitated. Not because she didn't love him. She did. Fiercely. But because she knew Lucas came with history. And wait. She remembered the phone call 2 years earlier. when Erin, Lucas's then-girlfriend, had called crying from Hawaii. Said she walked in on Lucas and Rachel in the bedroom. Said it wasn't the first time she'd felt like something was off. The way they looked at each other. The subtle touches. The kind of familiarity that didn't make sense. Rachel Brooks. Margaret had never fully trusted that girl. She was too quiet. Too close to Lucas. Too present, even when she wasn't supposed to be. But what truly broke Margaret's heart wasn't Rachel. It was Lucas. Her own son. Her baby boy. A man nearly 30 at the time, caught in something that went far beyond what she could explain or excuse. When she heard the accusation, Margaret nearly collapsed. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She packed her bag, flew to Hawaii, and looked Lucas in the eye. "Whatever this is," she said, "it ends now." He denied everything, of course. Said Erin was exaggerating. That nothing inappropriate had happened. That it was all a misunderstanding. Margaret didn't believe him. Not fully. But she made him a deal. Cut Rachel off, forever, and she'd help him come home and rebuild his life. Quietly. No police. No exposure. Just start over. Lucas agreed. Or so she thought. When he moved back into the house, Margaret kept everything under control. She monitored his phone calls. She watched his moods. She ensured he took his medication and did his therapy. She even modified the bathroom to make it accessible for his prosthetic. She didn't ask for thanks. But she did ask for trust. And she believed, wanted to believe, that maybe this time, Lucas was really trying. That maybe the brokenness in him had finally been mended by what he'd lost. His leg. His family. His chance with his children. But the truth was, Lucas never saw things that way. He saw coming home as a favor. As an opportunity. As a reset, but only on his terms. In the spring, Margaret started planning a trip to visit Daniel. Just a few days. Nothing long. She told Lucas where everything was, left a list of instructions, and gave him a prepaid grocery card in case he needed anything. He nodded. Promised to take care of the house. Said he'd stay busy organizing some of the storage. When Margaret left, she felt uneasy. She didn't know why. She just did. Daniel said she seemed distant at the airport. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. When he asked if everything was all right, she hesitated. Then said, "I think I left something unfinished." He assumed she meant work. Or maybe a personal errand. He didn't realize she meant a mistake. One she feared might cost her everything. When she walked back into the house 5 days later and saw the chaos, the padlock, and her son's indifferent face, it confirmed everything she had been afraid to admit. Something was unfinished. And now, something was deeply, dangerously wrong. The danger wasn't far. It was next door. Watching. For most of her life, Margaret Carson believed in boundaries. She believed in tending her yard, minding her business, keeping her voice low, and her expectations realistic. Elkridge, Colorado wasn't a bustling place. It wasn't a city of strangers. It was a quilt of people who had lived next to each other for decades, quietly, respectfully, predictably. That's why the new presence next door unsettled her. It began a few months before her trip to San Diego. The man who lived in the blue house to the right of hers, Mr. Harold Brooks, an elderly widower, had been in poor health. Margaret had seen the ambulance there once, late at night, and afterward he rarely appeared outside. But someone else did. A younger man. Blonde hair buzzed close to the scalp. Always wearing dark clothes, even in the July heat. He came and went without saying a word. No greetings. No smiles. Just lingering. At first, Margaret assumed he was a caretaker. A relative. Maybe a grandson helping during Mr. Brooks' final days. But the more she watched, the more she realized this man didn't act like someone caring for the elderly. He acted like someone marking territory. He never used the front door. He moved around the backyard. He stood still for long stretches behind the privacy bushes that lined the edge of Margaret's property, where her garden met his fence. And he stared. The first time she noticed him, Margaret was watering her dahlias. It was late afternoon. Sunlight golden. Sprinkler ticking rhythmically. She turned toward the corner where the fence sloped down and paused. He was standing there. half hidden behind the dense brush. Unmoving. She stared back. He didn't flinch. Didn't wave. Didn't speak. He simply turned and disappeared behind the fence. Margaret didn't tell anyone that first time. She didn't want to appear paranoid. She chalked it up to stress. Her mind playing tricks. But it happened again. And again. And the third time, he was holding something. From the distance, it looked like a phone. Or maybe a small camera. The lens pointed directly at her kitchen window. She dropped the dish towel in her hands. Stepped backward. Pulled the curtain closed. And locked the back door. That night, she sat in the dark, hands gripping the edge of her tea mug, the faint ticking of the clock the only sound in the house. She didn't sleep. The next morning, she tried to reason with herself. Maybe he was just awkward. Maybe he wasn't watching her at all. But something about the way he stood, rigid, deliberate, like he was measuring her, made her skin crawl. She considered calling the police. But didn't. Not yet. There were reasons. Some practical, some emotional. She didn't want to cause trouble for Mr. Brooks, who'd always been kind to her over the years. She didn't want to report a man who might just be strange, not dangerous. And more than anything, she didn't want to draw attention to herself. Instead, she called her older brother, Thomas Kent. It wasn't a panicked call. Just a quiet request. "Would you mind swinging by more often?" she said. "Just check on me sometimes." "Is something wrong?" "Not really. Just a feeling." He agreed without pressing. But the feeling didn't go away. Margaret began to notice things out of place. Her backyard gate unlocked one morning, even though she always latched it. The shed door slightly ajar when she swore she'd closed it. A pair of footprints in the side garden where no one should have walked. She started keeping the porch light on all night. She bought a motion sensor light for the backyard, but it flickered inconsistently. She didn't trust it. Lucas said she was being paranoid. "Mom," he sighed one evening, "you're letting this stuff get to you. Nobody's watching you. That guy next door's probably just a weirdo." She didn't argue. But she also didn't mention what she saw the week before. Lucas wasn't home that day. She had walked out onto the back deck to get the mail and noticed the neighbor's trash bin tipped open by the alley fence. Something white was sticking out. Curious, she stepped closer and saw an empty fast food bag and a printed photo. Half crumpled. She smoothed it. It was a grainy picture of her. Taken from behind, she was standing at her garden, watering and tilted. The angle, over the fence height. Someone had been taking pictures. That night, she didn't sleep. She waited until 2 a.m., when the world felt still and cruel, and tiptoed through the house. She checked every lock. Every window. Every curtain. She wrote down the neighbor's address. She searched online, but the name, Hayden Brooks, the young man she suspected, yielded nothing substantial. No employment records. No social media. No criminal record. But also, no existence at all. It was like he didn't exist officially. Not in Elkridge. Not in Colorado. She started to consider something darker. What if Hayden wasn't just odd? What if he wasn't related to Mr. Brooks at all? What if he was here for someone? Still, she said nothing to Lucas. Their relationship, though peaceful on the surface, felt increasingly fragile. Margaret sensed that Lucas's patience was wearing thin, or maybe it was her own. Their conversations were brief. Their routines polite but cold. Margaret no longer trusted his reassurances. Too many broken promises. Too many secrets buried under his charm. She began locking her bedroom door at night. Every night. When the idea of visiting Daniel came up again, Margaret decided. She needed a break. Distance. Space to think. A place where her skin might stop crawling. She booked the flight quietly. Didn't tell Lucas until the day before. He didn't seem to care. Just muttered something about frozen dinners and needing cash for gas. The morning she left, she took one last walk around the house. She checked every door. Made a note of her valuables. Fed the cat. Paused on the back deck. The bushes rustled once. But no one appeared. So she felt it. That she wasn't alone. That the house, her house, was no longer entirely hers. She turned, locked the door, and walked away. It would be the last time Margaret Carson ever saw that home with certainty. By the time she returned 5 days later, the locks had changed. The garden was dry. And the shadows she feared were no longer outside. They were waiting inside. 2 sons. 2 paths. Only one led back to her house. For most families, there's always some kind of sibling contrast. The loud one, the quiet one. The achiever, the dreamer. The rule follower, the rebel. But in the Carson family, the contrast wasn't subtle. It was glaring. Daniel and Lucas weren't opposites. They were opposing forces. Daniel Carson had always been the kind of son that made people nod in approval. Responsible. Thoughtful. A quiet leader, even as a teenager. He ran track in high school, joined student government, and went to community college while working part-time at a hardware store. He never missed curfew. Never raised his voice. By 24, he had bought a starter home outside San Diego with his wife, Eliza. They had 2 kids. A dog. A garden that was somehow always blooming. He called his mother every Sunday. Sometimes twice a week. He was, in many ways, the version of life Margaret had always dreamed for her sons, secure, measured, gentle. And then there was Lucas. Lucas, with his sharp tongue and sideways grin. Lucas, who quit things more often than he started them. Who changed jobs like he changed shirts. Who flirted his way out of consequences and then blamed the system when they eventually caught up with him. He was handsome. Charismatic. So people liked him, until they got too close. Even as a child, he had a way of making adults nervous. He'd stare just a little too long. Laugh at the wrong moments. He was smart, quick, even, but didn't use it for much besides getting out of trouble. Teachers said he had potential. By sophomore year of high school, he had stopped showing up entirely. Margaret never admitted it, but she had stopped trying to change Lucas years ago. Instead, she just tried to contain him. Keep him close. Keep him alive. She housed him when his teenage girlfriend got pregnant. Helped raise his 4 children when he couldn't keep a steady job. Cooked meals. Paid electric bills. Wrote letters to potential employers on his behalf. She told herself it was temporary. That he'd stabilize. Grow up. But instead, he kept folding inward, collapsing into smaller and smaller versions of himself. Sometimes he wanted to start a landscaping business. Other times he wanted to learn welding. Then it was carpentry. Then personal training. Nothing stuck. Not even fatherhood. When he moved to Arizona in his late 20s, after reconnecting with Benjamin, the father who had abandoned them decades earlier, Margaret held her breath. She hoped he would find some grounding. That maybe reconnecting with Daniel, who also lived in the area, would tether him. Instead, Lucas found something else. Someone else. Rachel Brooks. She was Benjamin's daughter from another relationship. A shy girl with quiet manners and light hair, 17 years younger than Lucas. She had grown up apart from the Carsons, never knowing her half-brothers until Benjamin re-entered their lives in Arizona. At first, Margaret thought it was sweet, how Rachel bonded with Lucas's children, how she helped with meals and school pickups. She assumed Rachel was just being a dutiful half-sister, eager to be included. But Daniel noticed things. Subtle things. The way Rachel's eyes followed Lucas when he left the room. The way they whispered too closely, touched each other's shoulders for too long. When he mentioned it to Margaret, she went silent. Then she said something Daniel never forgot. There are things a mother doesn't want to imagine. And then came Hawaii. Lucas left his wife and kids to chase another job, a solar panel installation company on Oahu. There, he met Erin Wallace, a woman with a 2-bedroom rental and a new baby on the way. It wasn't long before Rachel showed up. Officially? Just for a summer visit. Unofficially? Erin knew something was wrong. She heard whispers behind doors. Saw glances that lingered. One afternoon, she caught them in the bedroom. Rachel was 15. Lucas was 29. Erin called Margaret that night in tears. The next morning, Rachel was on a flight back to Texas. But that secret, that fracture, never fully healed. Lucas claimed it was a misunderstanding. Said nothing had happened. That Erin was jealous. Delusional. Margaret didn't believe him. She saw the truth in his eyes, not guilt, but defiance. He wasn't sorry. He was only sorry he got caught. She gave him an ultimatum. cut ties with Rachel, or she'd call the police. He agreed. Then a week later, he crashed his motorcycle on a mountain road and lost his leg. The call came at 3 a.m. Margaret didn't hesitate. She booked the next flight to Hawaii. Even after everything, even knowing what she knew, she still went. She still held his hand in the hospital. Still whispered that he'd be okay. Still fed him soup and brushed his hair and helped him learn to walk again. Because that's what mothers do. Even when they're breaking inside. When Lucas came back to Elkridge, Margaret hoped it would be the end of that chapter. No more Rachel. No more lies. Just quiet recovery. But she was wrong. Because some bonds, once formed in darkness, don't break easily. They just go quiet. Until it's time to resurface. Looking back, Daniel remembers the last conversation he had with his mother before her disappearance. She was calm. Measured. But something was in her voice. "Lucas is doing fine," she said. "But sometimes I feel like I'm living with a stranger." He asked if she wanted him to visit. She said no. Said everything was under control. But Daniel knew his mother. And that tone, that pause, meant something was not under control at all. The truth is, Margaret had raised 2 sons. One built a life from her sacrifices. The other drained hers year after year, until all that was left was a shell. And in that shell, something rotten had begun to grow. When she disappeared, it was Daniel who picked up the pieces. And Lucas who held the matchbook. But there was one name missing from the equation. One thread still hiding behind the curtains. Rachel. Sometimes the quietest witnesses carry the loudest truths. Erin Wallace had never been the kind of woman who looked for trouble. She lived simply. Worked part-time at a gift shop near the tourist strip in Honolulu. Rented a small but clean apartment on the 2nd floor of an aging walk-up, where wind chimes danced just above her porch railing. She had 1 cat, a growing belly, and a heart that, up until Lucas Carson, had rarely been broken. She met him on a Wednesday. He was charming as usual. Said all the right things. Knew how to hold a door open without looking performative. He smiled like someone who had just lost something and didn't want to admit it. She felt drawn in, but not in the usual way. He felt like someone in between. Like someone in transition. And Erin, for better or worse, had always believed in redemption. Within 3 months, Lucas moved in. Within 5, Erin was pregnant. By then, things had already started to crack. Lucas was restless. He rarely stayed in one job for more than a few weeks. He said he was waiting for the right opportunity. He slept late, disappeared for hours, and would come back with cheap trinkets or old CDs from pawn shops. At night he'd talk about his past, but only in fragments. A brother he didn't speak to anymore. A father he didn't respect. A mother who forgave too much. And then, one name kept returning. Rachel. At first, Erin assumed Rachel was an ex-girlfriend. The way Lucas spoke about her, not romantically, but possessively, made her uneasy. He said Rachel had been through a lot. Said she understood him better than anyone else. Said she was complicated but loyal. Erin once asked, "Is she your sister?" Lucas smirked. "Half. From my dad's side. We didn't grow up together, if that's what you're thinking." She didn't press. But she remembered that smirk. And the way it didn't quite reach his eyes. When Rachel arrived in Hawaii, Erin was told it was just a visit. A chance for Rachel to see the baby. A short summer break before college. But Erin noticed things within the first week. Small things. Like how Rachel always waited until Erin left the room to speak to Lucas. Or how they exchanged glances in silence, the kind of glances that don't come from casual affection. Once, she caught them whispering in the hallway, and when she walked by, they abruptly stopped. Rachel smiled at her with lips too tight. Lucas changed the subject. At first, Erin second-guessed herself. Maybe it was postpartum exhaustion. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe she was being jealous. The one word women get punished with when their instincts are right. But one night, everything changed. It was late, nearly 2 a.m. The baby had been crying, and Erin went to warm a bottle. As she passed the hallway, she heard faint laughter from the guest room. Not just laughter. Whispers. She approached slowly. The door was ajar. Inside, Lucas was lying on the bed. Rachel was beside him, her hand resting on his chest. Both fully clothed, but their posture too close. Too familiar. Lucas was stroking her hair. Rachel was smiling. It didn't look like siblings. It looked like something else. Something neither of them was trying to hide anymore. Erin didn't say anything that night. She returned to her room, fed her baby, and stared at the ceiling until the sky turned gray. The next morning, she called Margaret. She wasn't planning to. But her hand moved to the phone like it was muscle memory, as if someone had to know before she collapsed under the weight of what she saw. The call was short. Erin's voice trembled. Margaret barely spoke. There was a long silence. And then just one sentence. "Whatever's happening, it ends now." 24 hours later, Rachel was on a plane back to Texas. Lucas didn't deny it. He didn't apologize either. Instead, he blamed Erin. Said she was imagining things. Said she was stressed from the baby. Said Rachel was just helping him through a tough time. But Erin knew better. There was a heaviness in Lucas's eyes after Rachel left. A kind of simmering rage that he no longer tried to mask. Erin kept her distance. She planned her exit quietly. Then came the accident. Lucas took his motorcycle up a winding mountain road alone. He said he was clearing his head. He came back missing a leg. Erin came to visit him in the hospital, holding the baby in her arms. He barely looked at them. When Margaret arrived, Lucas's face changed. He softened. Almost like a boy again. Erin watched as Margaret leaned over his bed, whispering things only a mother could say. She watched the forgiveness. And part of her felt bitter. The other part felt relief. Because Margaret, finally, understood. Margaret told Erin she was taking Lucas home to Colorado. Said it was for his recovery. Said she'd keep him away from Rachel. Erin didn't argue. But she did something she hadn't done before. She took her phone. She wrote down everything. The dates. The conversations. The subtle moments. She put it in an email and sent it to herself. Just in case. She never saw Lucas again. He stopped returning her calls after 2 months. Stopped asking about the baby. She raised her child alone. And the years passed. But Erin watched the news from time to time. She heard about Margaret's disappearance. Saw the clips online. Recognized that name. Rachel Brooks. And the moment Erin saw Rachel standing beside Lucas during a press interview, her hands folded neatly, eyes lowered, she remembered. That night. That hallway. That touch. And her stomach dropped. Because she knew, deep down, the truth had followed them home. And this time, it hadn't just broken a family. It had buried one. She left to get space. She returned to a place she didn't recognize. Margaret Carson returned from San Diego earlier than planned. She didn't tell anyone, not Daniel, not Lucas. She just felt it. A heaviness in her chest that wouldn't go away. A silence too long. A hunch too sharp. She had only been gone for 5 days. But when she opened the front door to her house in Elkridge, she knew instantly it wasn't her house anymore. It started with the smell. Not foul. Just stale. Like air that hadn't moved. Curtains that hadn't been pulled. Food that had been left too long. Then the mess. Dishes stacked in the sink. A trash bag half filled but not taken out. Shoes in odd places. 2 open pizza boxes on the living room table, both from places Margaret never ordered from. But what stopped her cold was the door. Her bedroom door. It was locked from the outside. A brand new padlock. Chrome. Out of place. And absolutely not hers. Margaret stood there for a long time. Keys still in her hand. Her breath shallow. And then she did what instinct told her to do. She picked up her phone. She called Lucas. He answered on the second ring. "Hey," he said. "Lucas. Why is there a lock on my bedroom door?" The pause. "I was just trying to keep it safe," he said. "While I was organizing. Thought it'd be better if no one went in." "No one?" she asked. "Who else was here?" Another pause. Longer this time. "I meant me. I didn't want to mess anything up." Margaret didn't believe him. Not because of what he said, but how he said it. Flat. Rehearsed. Like a story he'd practiced, but not for her. He came home later that evening. Car pulled in slow. He walked through the door with a fast food cup in hand, wearing the same hoodie he always wore when he didn't want to talk. Margaret stood in the middle of the room, arms crossed. You had people in the house? No. Then why was the bathroom door locked yesterday morning? I don't know. And my makeup bag, it was moved. He looked at her. Expression blank. I was trying to pack some things. For your next trip. What trip? You said you might go back to Daniel's. I never said that. He didn't respond. That night they barely spoke. Margaret reheated soup. Lucas ate 2 slices of cold pizza and disappeared into his room. The air in the house felt tight, like all the windows had been sealed from the inside. Margaret wrote a list. She planned to replace the lock in the morning. She would check her jewelry box, her files, her medicine cabinet. She would regain control of her space. But she never got the chance. The next morning, Daniel woke up to silence. His mother should have sent a message by now, something small, like she always did after a trip. Home safe. Long flight, but Lucas was here. But this time, nothing. He waited. Called her around noon. No answer. He texted her. Still nothing. By evening, he began to worry. He called Lucas. No answer. By 11:57 p.m., Lucas finally returned the call. His tone was clipped. Said Margaret had come home. Said they had a small disagreement. Said she had packed a few things and left again. Maybe back to San Diego. Daniel asked. She didn't tell me. Lucas replied, maybe she didn't want to talk. Daniel knew his mother. And she never didn't want to talk. The next day, July 26th, passed with no word. No texts. No calls. No emails. Daniel tried again. Lucas didn't pick up. When he finally did, his voice had changed. Cold. Distant. He said, I don't know where she went. I thought she told you. By July 27th, Daniel had enough. He called every relative. No one had heard from Margaret. Not her brother Thomas. Not her church friend Gloria. Not even her pharmacist, who she called weekly for prescriptions. Daniel drove from San Diego to Elkridge overnight. He arrived just before sunrise. The house was still. Blinds closed. Curtains drawn. Inside, nothing felt right. Margaret's luggage was in the corner, unopened. Her makeup bag untouched. Her phone charger still plugged in by the bed. Her favorite shawl still draped on the chair. The details, small as they were, told Daniel the same thing. She never left. He confronted Lucas. Lucas shrugged. Said maybe she left in a rush. Said maybe she forgot to take things. Daniel pressed harder. That's when Lucas said something strange. I'm just worried they'll find my DNA on her, you know, from when we hugged. It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. Too soon. Too specifically. Like he was already imagining the next step. Already anticipating being caught. Later that day, Lucas agreed, reluctantly, to go with Daniel and Thomas to the police station to file a missing person report. He looked irritated the whole time. When officers asked when he last saw Margaret, his story changed again. He no longer said she left. He now claimed she'd sent him a text, asking him to unlock the door, and then left. He added a new detail. Said he'd gone to a party that night. At a woman's house. Named Catherine. Then to a nightclub. Then back home around 3 a.m. None of it made sense. Especially when Daniel checked Margaret's car. It was gone. And she never drove at night. She never left without telling someone. And her keys, her purse, her phone? Still in the house. Only the car was missing. And soon, that too would be found, abandoned, near an elementary school on the other side of town. By July 28th, Margaret's 69th birthday, the police officially opened a criminal investigation. A search of the house revealed something alarming. In the garage, behind the tool cabinet, were blood droplets. But fresh. Labeled. Sent to the lab. And the padlock on her bedroom? Still there. Still clean. No fingerprints but Lucas's. And yet, the person Lucas feared most wasn't Daniel. Wasn't the police. It was someone he hadn't mentioned at all. Someone who hadn't left town. Someone he thought he'd kept hidden. Rachel. She vanished from her home. But her truth was left in the sand. It didn't take long. Once the missing person report was filed and Margaret's car was found abandoned, Elkridge police shifted their posture. This wasn't a missing persons case anymore. This was criminal. They began canvassing the neighborhood, knocking on doors, looking at trash bins, reviewing footage from any cameras that might have caught a glimpse of her that morning. Most neighbors hadn't seen anything, but two did. One, a woman named Julianne, said she saw Margaret's car leave the garage around 7 a.m. She swore it was Margaret behind the wheel, same hair, same frame, same slow turn out of the driveway. But across the street, another neighbor gave a very different account. Rafael Vargas, a retired school bus driver, said the driver wasn't Margaret. He described a young woman, light skin, short blonde hair, and in the back seat, a shape. A dark silhouette, possibly a man. He couldn't be sure, but something about it felt wrong. He remembered thinking, why would a girl that young be driving Margaret's car? Inside the house, forensics moved quickly. The blood found in the garage wasn't Margaret's. It was Rachel's. That changed everything. Investigators pulled phone records, GPS data, call logs. Between 1 o'clock and 1:30 a.m. on the night Margaret went missing, Lucas's phone pinged near Red Mesa Ridge, an undeveloped patch of land between Elkridge and the desert outskirts. Between 5:30 and 6 a.m., 5 calls were exchanged between Lucas and Rachel's phones. They told police they were together all night. But if they were together, why were they calling each other? The walls began to close in. Detectives brought Rachel in first. She was composed, distant, answered questions politely. But her story didn't hold. When pressed about the calls, she hesitated. When shown the location data, she blinked. And when offered immunity in exchange for cooperation, she folded. Rachel's statement changed the course of the case. She said Margaret came home earlier than expected, found her in the house, yelled, told her to leave, told Lucas she'd never forgive him if he let that girl back in. An argument broke out. Rachel said she left. But Lucas followed Margaret into the garage. She didn't see what happened. But when he called her back at 2:30 a.m., he was crying. He told her he snapped. That it just happened. That it was too late. She returned to the house, helped him clean, helped him move the body into the trunk, and drove the car, with him hidden inside, toward the desert. She said she stood nearby as he dragged the body out. She said she didn't touch anything. But she was there. The next morning, Rachel went home. Lucas took a shower, threw out his hoodie, and waited. He thought it was over. On July 31st, just 5 days after Margaret's disappearance, a woman walking her dog near a desert trail spotted something strange under a tree. A wrapped bundle. Canvas tarp. A foul smell. She called the police. They found Margaret Carson's body, partially buried in the sand. The autopsy confirmed what they already feared. She had died from asphyxiation. Her hyoid bone was fractured, a sign of forceful strangulation. There were bruises on her forearms and wrists. No signs of struggle inside the house, which meant it happened quickly, likely in the garage. They also confirmed one more thing. There were no defensive wounds on Lucas, meaning Margaret never fought back. On September 4, 2009, Lucas Carson was arrested at a convenience store 3 blocks from his home. He was charged with second-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, destruction of evidence, obstruction of justice. Rachel Brooks was never charged. She testified in full during the trial. The courtroom was silent as she took the stand. She described the first time she kissed Lucas. She was 14. He was 29. She said it felt like love at the time. But looking back, it was something else. She told the jury they had a child together when she was 16. The baby was quietly adopted. Margaret had found out about the relationship twice, once in Hawaii, once again in Elkridge, and each time she had tried to stop it. And each time, Lucas found a way to keep Rachel close. Until the one person who could truly separate them came home early. Lucas showed little emotion during trial. His attorneys insisted there was no DNA tying him to the crime. They said Rachel had reason to lie, that her deal gave her incentive, that the evidence was circumstantial. But the jury saw through it. They saw the patterns, the shifting stories, the panic masked as indifference, the mother who had given everything and received silence in return. In 2011, Lucas Carson was found guilty, sentenced to 54 years in prison, the same age Margaret had been when she first started her second career. But that wasn't the end. 6 years later, in 2017, Arizona officials filed 29 new charges against Lucas for crimes committed between 2005 to 2006. Assault, unlawful imprisonment, corruption of a minor. Rachel was a minor then. Lucas took a plea deal to avoid life imprisonment. He pleaded guilty to 6 charges, received an additional 25 years. He will not be eligible for parole until age 92. Today, the house on Weller Street still stands. The garden is overgrown. The bedroom door was removed. But the scent of lavender, Margaret's favorite, still lingers when the wind is right. Neighbors walk past quietly. They don't say her name often, but they remember. Because Margaret Carson was more than a headline. She was a mother who gave too many second chances. A woman who rebuilt her life, only to have it dismantled by the one person she refused to give up on. And her story is a reminder that danger isn't always outside. Sometimes, it's raised under your own roof.